What paths do the birds follow? So it's easy to think about bird migration, for instance, right? As the birds are traveling across the country with big flocks, or even thinking about elephants in Africa as they move across the landscape. We know that they've been traveling in the same paths for thousands of years. But think for a minute about the smaller birds like the chickadee or a cardinal, for instance? Do they use roads and paths? Do they have favorite places to sit and perch? This morning, during the Mindful Bird Sit, we're going to be exploring this question together. I'm Kristi from Bird Mentor, and I help people connect more deeply with the birds through online courses, live events, and bird sits just like this one today. All right, let's get started. Lovely. All right, so everyone just go ahead and take a nice deep breath in and let it go. And before you do anything else, I just want you to notice your own self. So, how are you sitting? And again, don't change anything just yet, just notice it. How are you sitting? How are you breathing? And see if you can just hold it right now. Hold it in the posture and the pose that you were aware of it in. And really just highlight that. Highlight any aspects of that pose that you're curious about. I know for myself, like I'm leaning forward. I can feel that. And maybe it's part of it because I'm looking at the screen and I'm wanting to like reach out to you all. And I don't want to sit like that. I want to sit more upright. So now you can go ahead and adjust yourself. But it's good because I mean, how often throughout the day are we not conscious of how we're being in all sorts of ways? And our posture is just a great simple place to start, noticing our posture. And then we can go within to our breath. So becoming present to the breath and where it's traveling inside your body. So again, first just notice it. Let your breath just fall into a natural rhythm. Don't try to force an inhale or exhale. And see, is your breath rapid? Is it slow? Somewhere in between? Is it deep? Does it fill up your lungs? Using a small little bit of your capacity within your lungs when you take your breath. Good. So now that you become aware of what your current natural rhythm is, maybe not always, go ahead and this time we will intentionally take a breath in to try to fill our lungs. So nice deep full breath in, noticing all the different places it travels to inside your body, and then let it go. And do that a couple of times on your own. Nice. Good work. So then allow yourself to feel the sensations on your skin, and even those of us inside. Even some of you outside might have the wind or the sun you can experience. Maybe an insect is crawling on you. Whatever it is, just notice your own experience with the sensations on your skin. And if you are inside, you can still notice that maybe there's a fan blowing, or certainly your clothing is touching your skin. So just become aware of the sensations on your skin in this moment. I want you now just to check back in with your posture. Is it still the way you want it to be sitting? It can be really easy to fall back into that comfortable position, that go-to for us. And as you're sitting, just notice if there's any tension. Are you holding anything in your body right now tight? Sometimes we hold our bellies tight, our shoulders, even our jaws and our eyes. So if you are, just allow yourself to soften them if you feel that's a safe thing to do, an okay thing to do in this moment. And then just notice what occurs for you when you allow yourself to soften these parts of yourself you were holding really tightly to. Good. So we're just becoming familiar and connected with ourselves today, like we might a friend. We're just saying good morning, hello, I see you, I feel you, I know you, because that's what we're going to be doing with our friends outside today in a slightly different way. So we'll begin first with our ears. You can close your eyes if you want to. Sometimes that allows you to heighten your sense of hearing. And just notice the sounds that are around you. Just becoming familiar with those who are present in your environment this morning. And now intentionally, as if your sense of hearing were a hand just reaching out as far as it could go, allow your hand to stretch through all the sounds in the direction. Maybe we'll start with our right hand side. So just stretch as far as you can go with your hearing, far, 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 far out in the distance. What are the sounds that you're hearing off to your right? What's the neighborhood like over there? What's the vibe, in a sense? And then bringing your awareness a little bit closer to yourself, coming back in. And now we're going to stretch our hearing and our awareness of sound out in front of us. Again, as if you had a hand and it was reaching through all the sounds in front of you. You're just going to stretch, stretch, stretch that hand as if it was your ear and listen out in front of you as far as you can hear. Noticing all the different voices and sounds that you travel past to get to the furthest sound in the distance. Even if you're inside, attempt to do this through the walls. Great. Now bringing your awareness back to yourself and the sounds close to you. And then we're going to stretch out to our left, stretching your hand beyond the sounds. And as you travel past each sound, just acknowledge it until you get to the furthest reaches of your hearing capacity. Noticing who's out there, what they're engaging in right now. And then bringing it back to yourself. And finally, we're going to stretch our sense of hearing behind ourselves now. So we have a really big hand stretching out behind us, stretching past all the sounds, acknowledging them, each individually as we pass them, until we reach the furthest sound we can hear behind us. And just notice where that stops. We're aiming for very far away, but maybe that's only 100 feet behind you. Maybe it's only 20 feet behind you. Maybe that's as far as your hearing will take you in that direction this morning. And then as you come back to your own self, the sounds closer to you, just kind of do a scan 360 around you and noticing how far in each direction you were able to travel. What was the furthest sound you could hear in each direction? Wonderful. So just slowly, gently open your eyes when you're feeling ready to do so and allow your gaze to fall on something that's a little distance away. could be 10 feet, it could be 50 feet, wherever your eyes comfortably fall. Find a focal point, one item to look at. And then just gently allowing your eyes to expand, your vision to expand in all directions to the furthest reaches of your vision while you're still looking at that central point. Just noticing who's moving, what's moving. Also noticing what happens within your own body when you shift into this softened vision. What happens physically for you and emotionally. Beautiful. So today we're going to be connecting with our friends out there. So to start, if you have a bird that's visible, I'd like you to see if you can stick with it for a little while. So just go ahead and again, using owl eyes to help you find motion, this softened vision, just to find the motion out there in the landscape. And once you pinpoint the motion of a bird, and again, if there is no bird that you're seeing, you can follow an insect. Ideally, it's a bird just because that's what this is all about, but it's okay if it's not. And now what I want you to do is just follow the bird, but most importantly, it's not about the bird necessarily. Don't even have to worry about identifying that bird. But what I want you to do is notice who its neighbors are, who its friends are, who it interacts with. So there's a story in the life of this bird. Just like all of us, we wake up every day and we interact with either different individuals, different parts of our house, different parts of the landscape. Maybe we go get a cup of tea at the local coffee shop, interact with the people out there. And so I want you to follow this bird as if you're following a friend who's wandering around the neighborhood. And just, I want you to become really conscious of who and what they're interacting with. So that's the primary intention, is to notice what this bird is touching, what it's eating, who it's connected to. So we'll just start with one bird or insect at a time. So we'll spend the next couple of minutes, again, if you can, if the bird will stay around long enough, and just let yourself follow that one. And if there's absolutely nothing that's moving out there on your landscape, just keep sitting in owl eyes until you find someone, because someone will eventually show up. And just allow yourself to have a quiet, still practice right now, focusing on your breath. So one thing you can give your attention to is that if this bird is landing on particular branches, maybe it's moving about in the trees and it's landing on branches, noticing what kind of branches it's landing on. If it's moving around on the ground, what part of the ground is it moving around in? Does it prefer one area to another? So remember, we're focusing more on the substrates and what the bird is connecting with, not so much the bird itself right now. Good work. So if you've been focusing with one bird, you can go ahead and shift your awareness to another one if you'd like, or stay with that one. And again, if it's a new individual, then allow yourself to really get to know this one and what it's connected to, who it's connected to. Is it traveling with anyone else? Are there other ones around it? Maybe same species, maybe different species. And just track this bird's story this morning. Good work. So now you've been looking at one or two different birds, focusing on what they're standing on, what they're eating, who they're interacting with. And I'd like you just to continue this practice. So that's our main focus this morning is getting to know the different birds and who they're interacting with. So whether we're sitting inside or outside, just going to be looking out on the landscape in front of us and following, track it. See if you can just track one bird at a time and becoming more intimate, more connected with what that bird is interacting with. As if you were going to tell me the story of that bird later on, which you just might. So just think about that. I'm going to ask you, what is the story of this bird? And one thing I will throw out there is that, again, if you have nobody that's showing up right now, what I want you to do is you could even just, this is something I was doing because at the moment there's no birds out in my view. Um, you can look out onto the landscape and just remember the last time you saw a bird and do your best to really see if you can, like, in your mind, track that bird as it went through the landscape and really look at what was it sitting on? What was it eating? Who was next to it when it was there? Was there anyone else that showed up at the same time that it showed up? Another way you can look at this is that if someone came to you right now and said you were tracking your favorite birds, maybe the most common birds in your yard, and would be like, "Hey, Kristi, where would the red-shouldered hawk be right now? Could you point to it? Where would the chickadee be right now? Where would the wren be sitting right now? What's its favorite perch? And then what would it do while it was there with you?" So one thing we know to be true is, for instance, the elephants in Africa. We know that for many thousands of years, a lot of them have been using the same trail systems, right? And the birds migrating, they use the same paths to migrate that they have for thousands of years. And is that the same with the birds in your yard? Do they use the same roads within your bushes and shrubs and trees and plants? It may appear willy-nilly, but is it? Is it just random where they jump and hop? Or are they following paths and trails? Okay, nice work, everybody. So take the next moment or so and you can offer your own sense of gratitude or blessing to those ones that you interacted with this morning, the ones that showed up for you. And if nobody showed up for you, then the ones who do show up for you from time to time. So offer your own gratitude to them right now. Okay, take a nice deep breath. And that's the close of our practice this morning. Again, as always, if you need to head out, thank you for coming. So good to have you here. And otherwise, you're welcome to stay for our chat at the end. Um, so this morning's practice was brought to you by my local squirrel. um, and as I was sitting here in the practice, not seeing any birds, I was remembering that squirrel, and in particular, this one squirrel that I saw many years ago in my yard, and she was building a nest. And it was right before a big storm. She actually already had the nest, but she was like adding more material to it, and she was doing it very rapidly. She was just moving and moving. And what I started to notice was had this favorite road that she traveled up in the trees. You know, she'd go up one tree, jump over to another, land on this branch, jump over to another branch, go over here, jump over, and there was this whole system, this roadway that she used to go to the nest and then leave the nest. And so I was able just to, like, if I looked away for a while and was doing something else, I could just look up on any part of that road to find her again, because that was the same path that she traveled all the time. And yeah, and so I saw a squirrel this morning and just got curious about, its roads and the birds' roads and what they travel. And especially, it's really easy to sort of dismiss the smaller ones. It's easy to see like when big birds are migrating or the elephants are moving, right? We can easily see their trail systems. Or even here in North America, whether it's the elk or the deer or the buffalo, like the big ungulates, it's easy to see their trail systems. But to think about smaller animals, even insects, right? Insects and birds, and to think about their trail systems, their roadways through the landscape. Um, I think it's really fascinating. And now I'm wicked curious because I didn't have anyone to look at, but like 2 hours ago, this is like the most popular view. And it's like I usually do my yoga here in the morning and I can't, I often can't get much done because there's just so many birds to look at and things to watch. So I'm really excited for tomorrow to start to ask myself this question and start to track it. But I'd love to hear what you all either heard, saw, or observed while we were doing the practice this morning. And even if just something occurred to you, maybe you didn't see anything, but you had some thoughts or feelings come up for you that you want to share. So go ahead and just, as you know, raise your hand. Yeah, Kelly, please.
I noticed that this was, sorry about the sun. This was the longest that I had ever like watched a particular bird, and it was just a lot of fun to um, watch it. It was preening, so it was fun to see all that. And then he was maybe sunbathing, just kind of poofing out, and um, it's been a bit of a chillier morning today, but yeah, so that was a lot of fun today. Thank you.
Yeah. What did you notice like while it was like what occurred to you while it was preening and while you were watching it?
Well, I noticed that he was comfortable doing that, even though there was another chickadee just a few branches over, at least according to my ears, because I couldn't see him, um, doing his DVDs. They never got more than four, but he was unbothered. But I feel like that partnership made him be able to do
Mm.
what he did, because he could be comfortable knowing there was somebody else who had his back. That was what I thought.
Yeah, isn't that so nice? Just to think about whether it's in our own life or watching the birds have that relationship with each other. Yeah,
Yeah,
sweet.
yeah.
Thanks for
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah, I love when you take us out to the woods with you, out to your river spot. Yeah, that's great. Great. Who else would like to share? And for those of you, there's a bunch of you I can't see at the moment, so I can't see you waving your hands. Just know that remember that your monitors, your screens are off. You're welcome to keep them off if you need to, but you just have to raise your virtual hand if you want to share. Yeah. All right, Julia, please.
Well, I have had occasional hummingbirds or noticed occasional hummingbirds. I have a lot of options for them here, but today there were two. And I remember last year there was a time when there were seven, about this time of year. And I was speculating, why all of a sudden more, and was guessing maybe they kind of gather to migrate. I don't know. Anyway, there's a lot for them to stop for here. And but I noticed between these two, they were not friendly at all. If one came in even, 5 feet away from where the other one was feeding, it would get chased off. I thought, well, how do they do that? How do they kind of come together as they moved south, if they do, and not and still be so belligerent to each other? But there's plenty here for them. It looks like they tend to favor feeding in the sun. It's a beautifully cool morning, so shade or I could sit in the sun and it would, it's just a great morning. But then one would go over and feed over in the shade too. So I found that kind of interesting. And they always like to light, one just did on a dead branch or just a dead twig. They don't like to hide in the leaves. And they just sit right out there and look so tiny when they're perched. Yeah. So it was hummingbirds this morning. I'm glad I was out here to see them.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It's reminding me of the question that's come up before, which is, when birds are migrating, it's simply the habitat and the food source that draws them together. Like they're hummingbirds, they're all going to want the same kind of food, the same kind of habitat. So is that simply what draws them together, or do they actually want to be together, right? And we think about the broadwing hawks when they migrate, they all migrate together, right, in big groups. But is it simply because anciently this is their roadway and this is the best wind and current to move on, and that's just so happens that they all know that and they all move together because of that? Or is it the species that want to be together when they move and they migrate? And I think it's a really interesting question just to ponder and to ask ourselves about that, And that's the question I've often wondered too when I thought about the broadwing hawk. I was like, think about all those hawks and they have to come down and land at some point, right? And like they're going to be hungry. So like, what are they all going to eat? Like all of, like, imagine like all these like hundreds of hawks like together in one habitat. Like what? That's amazing just to think about. And yeah, I love that question, Julia. Yeah, go for it. Did you want to say something
Well,
else?
I wonder, some people put out feeders, which I think are a lot more work than growing a plant, but there will be a lot of hummingbirds, 10 or 20, at some of these big feeders all at once.
Mhm.
And whereas around plants, I mean, I've got it like a buffet and things. I wouldn't think of lantana as being a hummingbird type of thing, but they seem to prefer that over the honeysuckle and the Mexican petunia and others that have the shape that you would expect a hummingbird to go for.
Mm.
And so I don't know, maybe lantana has more available nectar, easy
Mm.
to get. I don't know.
Yeah, it is interesting with the idea of introducing feeders onto the landscape, because we see, often when I work with my encourage them not to do their bird observations at the feeder. Not that you never should. I mean, I've had feeders before, it's really wonderful to get to watch the birds that close. But to see authentic, wild bird behavior, you want to do so not at the feeder, because feeders elicit behaviors that are unnatural for birds, because oftentimes the food source isn't just this one drug. You know what I mean? Like when you think about the hummingbird feeders, it really is kind of like crack for hummingbirds. And so we don't have that in nature. There's a flower here, a flower. Not that they don't get protective. Of course, they defend their little bush. There's, especially during the breeding season, some hummingbirds get very intense with their defending. And I think a lot of people have this perspective that, hummingbirds, oh, they're so beautiful, they're so sweet. And it's like, no, man, they are vicious. They are warriors, and they will fight to the death for their little bush. I mean, it's probably big to them, but Yeah, so I remember watching this woman I knew in I got to visit her. Where was she? Not Wyoming. She was in Wyoming, and they fed the deer outside of their house. The deer and the turkeys they fed. And I remember watching her put out the wild deer, she would put out the hay and a few other things for like this feed for the deer in the wintertime. And they would come and we would see deers, like the deer fighting, they'd get up on their hind legs and they'd like, kick each other. And I was like, I've never seen that before. And then I realized, oh, there's this one sole food source and everybody wants it because it's again, it's like crack, like they're just like, this is really good grain or whatever. And it's all here. We don't have to work for it. And so, it's kind of like wolves at a kill. I suppose that which is a natural thing. You just imagine like wolves at a kill and they have a pecking order and they know like, all right, alpha's in first and gets to eat. And then, everyone else sort of gets the scraps after that. And I think birds start to elicit that behavior when there's that sole food source. And not that it's a bad thing, it's just different. It's just a different than their sort of natural, maybe wild behavior. Yeah. Yeah, super fascinating, Julia. Awesome. Who else would like to share their story from this morning? What occurred to you while we were practicing? Yeah, go for it. Gabrielle.
Um, well, no birds today. I don't know where they all went. Some of them flew over very fast, but so it was all about the insects. And I have two pepper trees in front of me, and they're in different stages of blooming. The one on the left is already getting all those green kind of peppers, but they're not red yet. And the other one is in a more dormant stage. And so the one to the left was full of bees, and the one to the right had all the fig beetles. And they sort of crossed paths, but mostly they stayed in their own tree, which was fascinating. Um, and the bees were much more intent on just staying with the tree, whereas the fig beetles were just all over the place and would go back, and then they would. And I noticed that if they landed, it was kind of like at the very top of the tree where the really young leaves were. I don't know if they eat them or anyway, it was fascinating. And then I just went kind of down memory lane and started thinking about all the birds that come and visit me and some favorite memories of a crow teaching a fledgling how to fly, or I have a peregrine falcon that seems to come whenever I really need wisdom. So, and then I have a channel behind me, and that's definitely a major path from the ocean in. And so the egrets and the seabirds come down that path. So it was very interesting to do the actual reality now and my memory of
Yeah.
birds. Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of fun to play back and forth with those two. And I love that you were tracking the insects today. Um, yeah, that's really that can be a beautiful practice as well. I think I was sitting on my deck meditating one day and I can't remember, this was a couple years ago when I lived back in Connecticut and I don't remember if it was some kind of bee or no, I think it was some kind of fly. It was just this little fly, but it had its little territory, and it was like it would go like up and over and down and over, and it would want to sit there, but then it would kind of come up, and someone else would come, and it would sort of do its thing together, and then they would come back, but it would always come back to its little spot. It had this one little spot it always wanted to come back to, but like it did this little motion, and I was like, wow, I never realized that was your spot. Here I go just walking through the deck at times and not paying any attention to the insects. And after that point, I was always sort of mindful of, I think he eventually moved off to something else. But while it was still out there, I was like, that's his little spot. I'll give him his little spot over there and won't interrupt him or her, whoever it was. But Gabrielle, can you remind us where you are right now?
I'm in Southern California in Huntington Beach.
Okay, got it. Somehow I always imagine you in New Mexico. I don't know why that is.
Uh-huh.
I have you in my mind in New Mexico. Okay, Southern, that makes sense. When you said like the path and you mentioned egrets and all that stuff, I was like, okay, she's not in New Mexico. Like, crap to the
No,
ocean. I'm like, all right, I gotta ask. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
no, thank you. I love your class.
Yeah, good. It's great to have you here for sure. All right. Anyone else? Well, we can take one last one. Yeah, Linda, please. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I've just been watching. I've had like groups of birds coming in and going because the migration has kind of started here. It was so cold for a while. So, but it's been interesting. I've been just watching that every time a mourning dove shows up, um, which is wonderful because we haven't seen many of them over the past few years. One or two will show up, and the all of the siskins and the chickadees and the goldfinches take off, kind of go up in the tops of the trees, and then a female turkey always comes in after her. And I was just watching today to see if it was still happening today, and it happened again today. The mourning dove came in, and the female turkey is no more than a minute behind it, and they're just grazing on the grass, the two of them, and then they'll fly off, and all the little guys come back for a while, and then the mourning dove comes back, and then the turkey comes back behind it. And this, I just watched them. They just came back again for the third time. So I thought, okay, so there's some kind of relationship here. Are they good buddies, or is this um, the norm? I've never noticed it before the last few days, that because I've been watching the mourning doves because I thought, oh, it's so great to see them again. But anyway,
Oh, I love, and I mean, Kelly was the only one I could see, but I wonder if everyone else was visible also. But like, both Kelly and I were like, oh, like that's what a wonderful story. Oh my gosh, I love those, like the mystery of the interaction,
yeah.
Like, is it kind of that question with the migration? Is it just sort of random? They both happen to like the same kind of thing at the same time? Or is there actually some story, some relationship with the two of them that brings them
Hmm.
together? And that one follows the other, or that they're just together, like, yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously you've been tracking it for the last couple of days, and it's like, it's been happening like clockwork.
Yeah, it's been consistent. So I've just been really surprised. I've never noticed it before. So,
Yeah,
just
and
so
it also feels like two unlikely, what do you call that? There's like a saying that goes like unlikely characters or unlikely pairing or something like that, where they're it's kind of like the, oh, Lady and the Tramp kind of a thing, where it's
oh
sort of like you two, like a mourning dove and a turkey, like
yeah,
that just feels kind of random. Like what?
yeah.
No, it's not two that I. If someone's like, who do you think would like to hang out with a turkey? Like, I don't think mourning dove would be the first bird I would think of, or even the
No,
second bird I would think of.
or at all. Yeah.
Vice versa, yeah. Although, I mean, mourning doves they're ground birds for the most. I know they go up and they'll perch for sure, but they do spend a lot of time on the ground.
Hmm.
Linda, what else do you think it's just a random, like these, because it can be that animals have that just like humans do, where like, this animal likes that animal. They just like it's a very intimate and personal thing. Do you get that feeling like it's a personal connection, or do you feel like it's some kind of species connection, that there's something about the mourning dove and the turkey, like as a species?
I honestly don't know. I'm just kind of I'm gonna keep watching because I really can't tell, but they are always in close proximity when they're here. It's not like, the mourning dove flies in. I'm pretty sure it's usually the mourning doves that arrive first and then the turkey comes, but it could be there's times when the turkey comes first and then the mourning dove. But they're closely, I mean, like right now there's maybe 4 feet between them, and they don't let it get more than to about that. They're wandering around on the grass, both of them, just um, picking out whatever they're eating in the grasses here. So, and the turkey went over by the meadow is just beyond the fence here for our backyard, and the turkey went over there, and the mourning dove meandered right behind it, and then they were both over there, and now they're both back closer to where I'm sitting. So um, I don't know, it's pretty interesting.
Right, and it could be like a weird thing where maybe that mourning dove like fell out of its nest and it just so happened that like the turkey was nearby and it was like, "Oh, great, mom," or like, it's like it became part of its flock somehow and
Yeah,
who knows what the story is with it or maybe it does feel safer to have, because there
yeah,
aren't is it because of the Eurasian collared dove in your area that there's not they
yeah.
think yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
they- Yeah, the Eurasian collared dove seems to have been pushing out. I mean, for a few years we didn't see the mourning doves at all, but they were back a little bit last year and more this year.
Right,
So
you were saying they're making a comeback in a sense, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's what the Audubon is mentioning, that the mourning doves seem to be coming back into the area, and the collared doves are still here too. They're not. I mean, I haven't seen any signs of friction or anything, but I mean, I'm just right here in one spot, so I don't know. But
Yeah.
and this turkey and this mourning dove are definitely not hostile. They're obviously comfortable with each other.
Right. Has
So
anyone else ever witnessed, let's just stick with these particular species because we could go off into all sorts of
mhm.
tangents with other species, but just out of curiosity, anyone else ever witness the mourning dove hanging out, always with another bird or a turkey with other birds, in that kind of way? Anyone ever witnessed that before? Linda, I love, and feel free to jump in if anyone has. Linda, I just love that you're giving your attention to these two because I'm thinking back when I lived in Colorado and I remember the turkeys would come to the bird feeder like every day at this one house I lived at where they fed birds. And I know there was mourning doves around. I don't think I would have, I know I didn't give attention to it or pay attention to like if I think I would have just dismissed it and not paid much attention to it. But I love that you really looked deeply and richly at these two together, that there's some connection there with the two of them. Yeah, I think it's just a real like a rich way that you look at the world.
Oh, yeah, well, thank you. But I think, it's primarily because all the other birds fly away and then there's just these two. So it's not like there's a group of mourning doves and a group of turkeys. It's these two.
These two. Yeah, yeah. Oh, it's so cool. I can't wait to follow more of this story.
Yeah,
With
I'll let you know the next
Yeah,
season.
thank you. Thank you. Oh, this is so good. I love being with you all. Well, thanks everyone for coming today. And I'm trying to, I forgot that today was a holiday. So I always, feel free to like chime in if you all know of something coming up. Some of you guys often do that. You're like, oh, wait, Kristi, next week's such and such. So definitely let me know. I think it's actually often better for a lot of people, unless it's a major holiday, to come on days like Labor Day, Memorial Day, that sort of thing. I know Marisa, like you can be here today, for instance, and you normally can't. And so, anyway, we'll see you next week unless there's something else that I don't know about that's coming up in the world. But all right, everybody, have a beautiful week. We'll talk
Thank
to
you
you
so
next time.
much. Thank
Yeah,
you.
likewise. All
Love
right,
it.
take good care.
You too.